Most people believe that power belongs to those who stand at the center of attention. The loudest voice, the richest person, the one with the greatest reputation. From childhood, we're taught that success means being seen, to be recognized, to build a name that everyone remembers. But history tells a very different story. Some of the most influential people who ever lived mastered a skill that seems almost invisible itself: the ability to disappear. Not physically, psychologically. While everyone else competed for attention, they quietly observed. While others desperately tried to prove their intelligence, they patiently gathered information. And while the crowd focused on appearances, they focused on reality. Human beings are naturally attracted to what shines the brightest. We notice confidence before competence, noise before wisdom, movement before stillness. This isn't because we're irrational. It's because our brains evolved to prioritize whatever demands immediate attention. A loud sound, a sudden movement, a raised voice. All of these instantly pull our focus. But what captures attention isn't always what deserves it. And that simple misunderstanding has shaped entire civilizations. Throughout history, countless leaders have built their influence by understanding one fundamental truth. If people are looking in one direction, they rarely notice what's happening somewhere else. This principle exists everywhere: in politics, in business, in relationships, even in everyday conversations. Think about the quiet person sitting in the corner of the room. Most assume they're shy. Some believe they lack confidence. Others barely notice them at all. Yet while everyone else is busy speaking, that person is collecting something infinitely more valuable than attention: perspective. They notice who interrupts others, who constantly seeks approval, who changes their personality depending on who's watching, who grows uncomfortable during silence, who becomes defensive when challenged. Every reaction tells a story. Every unnecessary word reveals another piece of someone's character. Carl Jung believed that people unconsciously reveal themselves through behavior far more than through intention. Someone may carefully choose every word they speak, but they cannot control every expression, every hesitation, every glance, every emotional impulse. Eventually, their true nature begins to emerge. The invisible observer notices what everyone else overlooks. Not because they're exceptionally intelligent, but because they're paying attention while everyone else is trying to be noticed. Perhaps this explains why ancient philosophers valued silence so deeply. Socrates rarely entered conversations trying to impress anyone. Instead, he asked questions. Then he listened, patiently. The more others spoke, the more they unknowingly exposed the weaknesses in their own thinking. Socrates didn't defeat people with louder arguments. He allowed them to discover their own contradictions. That is a completely different kind of power. One that doesn't depend on force. It depends on understanding. Because true influence has never belonged to the person who speaks first. It belongs to the one who understands people before they understand themselves. And that is where invisibility becomes dangerous. Not because no one sees you, but because everyone assumes there's nothing worth seeing. While they continue chasing attention, you quietly begin seeing the world with a clarity they never realize they've lost. There is something fascinating about people who no longer feel the need to be noticed. They move differently. They think differently. Most importantly, they are far more difficult to control. Modern society encourages constant visibility. Every opinion must be shared. Every achievement must be displayed. Every emotion must be explained. Silence has become uncomfortable. Privacy has become suspicious. And invisibility is often mistaken for failure. But the greatest philosophers rarely measured their lives by how many people were watching them. They measured them by something far more important: freedom. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire that stretched across continents. Every decision he made affected millions of lives. Yet in his private journal, he repeatedly reminded himself of a truth that feels almost impossible to follow today. Do not become dependent on the opinions of others. Because the moment your happiness depends on applause, your peace belongs to the crowd. Think about how many decisions people make every day simply because they fear being misunderstood. They stay in conversations they no longer enjoy. They pretend to agree with ideas they secretly reject. They chase careers they never wanted. They wear masks so convincing that eventually, even they forget who they really are. All because they fear becoming invisible. But invisibility is not the absence of value. It is the absence of unnecessary performance. The oak tree does not announce its strength. The mountain does not seek admiration. The stars do not shine because someone is watching. They simply exist according to their nature. Human beings, however, often spend their entire lives performing for an audience that is barely paying attention. Schopenhauer believed that much of human suffering comes from living through the eyes of other people. We begin measuring ourselves according to standards we never chose. Success becomes comparison. Confidence becomes approval. Identity becomes reputation. And little by little, our real self disappears beneath the image we believe others expect. This is why the invisible person often possesses an unexpected advantage. They stop performing. When you no longer need everyone to admire you, you become free to observe, to think, to question, to grow without announcing every step. The world becomes remarkably different when you stop asking, "What will people think?" and start asking, "Is this true?" Most people never reach that point. They remain trapped inside an invisible prison built from expectations. They chase status instead of purpose, recognition instead of wisdom, popularity instead of peace. The philosopher chooses another path. He understands that attention is temporary, character is permanent. Reputation belongs to other people. Integrity belongs only to you. That is why the quiet individual often becomes the strongest one in the room. Not because they dominate others, but because they are no longer dominated by the need to be seen. Ironically, the less they seek attention, the more powerful their presence becomes. Because genuine strength has a quality that cannot be imitated. It doesn't demand attention. It naturally earns respect. And perhaps that is the greatest secret of invisibility. The people who stop chasing the spotlight are often the ones who finally begin seeing the truth hidden behind it.
Perhaps the greatest misunderstanding about invisibility is believing that it is a strategy to hide from the world. It isn't. It is a strategy to stop being controlled by it. There is a profound difference between disappearing out of fear and stepping back out of wisdom. One is an escape. The other is freedom. Most people spend their lives reacting. They react to criticism before understanding it. They react to praise before questioning it. They react to trends before thinking for themselves. Little by little, their emotions become controlled by forces outside their own mind. Every compliment changes their confidence. Every insult changes their mood. Every opinion changes their direction. Without realizing it, they have surrendered ownership of themselves. The Stoics warned against this centuries ago. Epictetus taught that the only true freedom comes from controlling what belongs to you, your thoughts, your judgments, your actions. Everything else exists beyond your control. Yet modern life encourages the opposite. People wake up checking notifications before checking their own thoughts. They compare their lives to strangers. They seek validation from people they have never met. They fear being forgotten more than they fear losing themselves. And in that endless pursuit of visibility, they become prisoners of attention. The invisible person chooses another path, not because they reject society, but because they refuse to let society define their worth. They understand something that takes most people decades to learn. Attention is borrowed. Character is owned. Fame is temporary. Integrity remains when nobody is watching. Imagine an ancient sculptor spending years carving a single marble statue. No audience, no applause, no cameras documenting every step, only patience, discipline, and purpose. He understood that excellence was not created through recognition. Recognition was sometimes the consequence of excellence. Modern culture has reversed that idea. Many people now chase recognition first, hoping excellence will somehow follow. But history has always rewarded those who mastered the process instead of chasing the applause. Leonardo da Vinci filled thousands of pages with observations that were never meant to impress anyone. Marcus Aurelius wrote private reflections that were never intended for publication. The greatest thinkers often worked in silence, long before the world discovered their ideas. Because wisdom grows quietly. A tree does not become taller because people watch it. It grows because its roots continue expanding beneath the surface. Human beings are no different. Your deepest growth usually happens where nobody can see it. In the books you read alone. In the habits nobody applauds. In the difficult choices that receive no recognition. In the moments when doing the right thing costs more than doing the easy thing. Those invisible moments slowly build an invisible character. And one day, people call it confidence. But confidence was never created overnight. It was built inside thousands of unnoticed decisions. Perhaps that is why the wisest philosophers rarely sought admiration. They sought understanding. Because admiration fades, understanding remains.